So we're going to get started today. Today we're going to talk about the future of AI-enabled security and autonomous access control. I am going to be sharing with you a little bit around artificial intelligence. I'll be educating you on what that is and breaking it down. And we're also going to talk about the future of autonomous access control, what that means. What is autonomous access control? We'll talk about the traditional methods of it, and then we will talk about what the future entails and where we can go with it and how we can kind of reimagine the way that we control access in our buildings. And then I'll end with some market trends and some technology trends that are coming out. Quick background about me. My name is Sarah, and I have been in the building technology space for over 5 years now. I have a background in electrical mechanical systems. I used to work at Johnson Controls. I was in the smart building space. And so now I work at a company called Alcatraz. We're an artificial intelligence company that is actually creating autonomous access control. And, this presentation today is going to be agnostic to that. Although, I will be making some references to other products, and I will be speaking to access control as a whole. So please note that anything I speak about today is fully agnostic, and my goal here is to just educate and teach and make everybody aware of what the true possibilities look like. Lastly, I'm also the host of the Innovation Nation podcast, and the group 337 that's sponsoring this event today is my producer, and so I'm one of the content providers for that as well. And on that podcast, we talk about all the different technology out there, and we also talk about where the future is going and a lot of disruptive topics too. So if anyone's ever interested, it's on LinkedIn, and you are more than welcome to check it out. And I also have it in my profile here today if anyone wants to see it. So jumping into, AI, right? What AI is. AI is, it's a mystical concept for a lot of people. And I think that AI is all around us and we don't realize it. And I think, my goal here was to kind of just set the stage with a really, humorous way to think about it. And here on the left-hand side here, you see the gentleman's running, and he says, "I told the fridge that I will only jog if we do it together." Well, we all know refrigerators don't run on treadmills. But the messaging here, the idea here is that we as humans tell AI what to do. And I think it's important that we remember that AI is our friend. AI, artificial intelligence, as I know, it's a scary concept to some, and I'm going to tell you, it's not what you see in the Matrix. And so what we'll do in the next few slides, I'm going to break it down. I'm going to help you really conceptualize it and understand it as it being all around you in our daily life, and then also like what it really is, and then how we can use it to leverage it to make our lives easier as building owners, building operators, and for the security professionals on the line, for you as well. As I just mentioned, it's all around us. This is everyday technology that you might experience or see that resembles AI or has AI as part of the secret sauce. And so when it comes to artificial intelligence and what it really is, I think that the key takeaway here in our daily life is that it's something that we have introduced into our everyday lives to make our lives easier, right? Alexa tells us what time it is. You have the Amazon security system that can pop up out of its base, and when somebody breaks into your house, it knows to look for the person in the house to secure your home for you, right? We've been so advanced in technology in our residences. Why can't we get there in our buildings, right? What is it potentially that's stopping us? What is the gap that we're experiencing why can't we have the same concepts that we interact with every single day in our large industrial commercial sized buildings, right? So I think it's important that we just realize that as we move into the AI topic, and as I talk about autonomous access control, let's use our imaginations today. Let's use the next 30 minutes to think big. I don't like to do that often, but I think that the key here about when we talk about the future of what we can do, we're in a very pivotal point in the industry today with COVID-19 and what's going on. And there's a lot of room there's a lot of room for improvement that we can leverage. So if we think about, to button up this slide and the messaging here, if we just think about how AI is actually all around us, and realize that we're actually quite immersed in it, and that it's friendly, that it's good, it makes our lives better. We can take that concept and we can apply it to our buildings, and not just make us as owners and operators have easier lives when it comes to the operations around owning a large or managing a large industrial sized building, but how can we make the experience for the end user better? The user that's actually entering our spaces, how do we optimize and make that the most comfortable and the most seamless experience, while also being respectful towards the fact now that we have issues like COVID-19 that we have to field and we have to bring people back to work. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think that the key takeaway here when we think about AI, the best way I like to describe it is as if it's a brain in a box. Back in the day, years ago, we had computer scientists, computer engineers who designed computers and decided that they wanted to build a brain in the box. And that's as simple as I can make it. Brains in the box computers are basically artificial neural networks, which on the left-hand side, you're all familiar with what a human brain looks like. We've basically copied what a human brain is, and we've put it into a box. And we have told computers now, we use software and we use algorithms to tell the computers what to do, what to look for, and then to make decisions with the data that we feed it. And so it's really important to note that, because as we think about just the fact that, you know, the brain in the box is processing data, no, AI is not going to replace humans. It's not going to replace our jobs, as long as the people behind it that are coding it and that are telling the brain in the box what to do are not telling it to replace a human, right? And I say that really, really high level, but the point is that the bias of the AI is the bias in AI is of the coder, not the computer. The computers are not going to start making their own decisions necessarily. Now, when we get into machine learning and deep learning, that's a whole other realm, but not for today. But if anyone is ever interested in learning about that, please reach out. And I would love to have a conversation and help you understand how we do that and what that is. And I will touch on, a little bit of machine learning in when we talk about autonomous access control. But, the point is that the brain in the box is being told what to do by a human. And so if you think about it now, when it comes to security and our buildings and controlling access, we as humans know how to do that. We know how to control access. We have known how to do it for many, many years. And so how can we take what we know and leverage the brain in the box to make our lives easier when it comes to physical security and making our spaces safer, more comfortable, and more inviting, right? For so many years, access control has been a very clunky, unappealing system, not just to deploy it, not just to manage it, but for those using it, for those who are going into the buildings. It's never been the shiny object for this industry or for our facilities. And so how do we make it the sexy system, just like video is, right? How do we leverage technology to make access control more enjoyable? And the answer is AI. So I'm going to talk to you now about autonomous access control. We're going to go through the trends of access control in and of itself and what the future looks like. But with this simplistic breakdown of AI, and at the bottom here, it's very simply broken down to algorithms, software programs that humans are building, telling the brain in the box what to look for. Then the brain in the box gets data that's pushed into it, and it communicates with the data, it reads the data, and then we make a decision. So in access control specifically, there's an architecture and a hierarchy of the system that data gets processed through, and typically in a tangible example of how we process data through wires, right? So when you have network cables in your buildings, there's information getting processed there, right? The same idea of a video camera. There's images that we're pulling in through a camera and that we're processing out to a server, right? And so that information is what we feed to the brain in the box. And the brain in the box has a code and an algorithm to go through that information, to systematically go through the information to then make a decision with. So I know this sounds, I might be speaking very high level, very mystical here, but we're going to break it down now and apply it to a couple use cases in the next few slides to really help you understand it from a tangible perspective. So now with access control, right? For many years, it's been very clunky. We started with manual check-in, human-operated check-ins, moving into badge reader technology. When badge readers came out, it was the best thing since sliced bread. It made so many of our lives easier. Now, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, that's really when it had its highlight. And the reality is we still use it. A lot of the technology in our buildings today is still from the 70s or the 80s. It's the original technology that has not been evolved or innovated. And part of how we've somewhat transitioned is new versions of it, right? It's not necessarily like we've introduced something completely brand new, but we've upgraded, right? So now you see Bluetooth technology, now you see touchless technology, you see facial recognition out there. Biometrics is another example. Biometrics is a way that we've heightened security and tried to evolve into the future. But here's the thing, with COVID now, and with all the new mandates coming out, there's a huge gap. There's a massive gap between yesterday and today and where we're going tomorrow. And we have to find a way to fill that gap. And with all the investment that has been made in our access control solutions, which is another key component to access control, is that it's not like video where you can just install cameras and surveil. Access control is a system that's the last chain of command when it comes to actually letting people into spaces. And the investment is large when it comes to that. There's many layers to access control. How do we fill the gap without having to spend billions of dollars, right? So this is just showing you the layers, the components, how there's so many parts and pieces to a traditional access control platform. So I'm not going to dive too much into teaching everybody what really traditional access control is. I think those who are on this call are somewhat familiar with how we control access in our buildings using the technology we have today. I think what's important to think about, though, is how can we minimize the amount of layers to our systems? Because the more layers, the more management. The more layers to manage, the more time it's going to take. And with a large gap to fill, it's very hard to fill a gap when you don't have more time on your hands. How do we get more time? AI. Now, AI is not going to replace the need for the human to do what the human's already doing today. But AI can replace a lot of monotonous tasks and a lot of the challenges that we face every day in access control. We can eliminate some of that, and we can now fill the gap between today and the future with COVID, touchless demand, making our buildings more seamless, more space within for our people to walk through. How do we manage all that and make it safe for people to come back to work? It's very hard to do today with a lot of the traditional access control systems that are out there. So when it comes to how we can solve that problem beyond using AI to eliminate some monotony to the management of our systems, we can also use AI for the users themselves who are walking up to doors. And we can also leverage edge technology, which I'm going to briefly touch on. But I'm going to move through these slides because I already talked through this, but this was just showing, the cumbersome around biometrics and the reader technology and the current layers today that we have to experience when accessing spaces. And I want to talk about now autonomous access control and edge technology and AI and what that means. So how do we make the experience better? How do we make it better for everybody involved? And how do we fill the gap between the old technology and the new demands of society, right? Everybody wants to go back, everyone who wants to go back to work, right? Because there's some people who still don't want to necessarily leave their homes. They like working from home, but I can tell you a large majority are starting to really realize the benefit of working in a facility. And I would say maybe it's not every 5 days of the week, but we have 3 days on, 2 days off, right? Whatever that looks like for the entity that is within your large commercial spaces. I think the reality is that we know commercial space is not going to go away. If anything, we're just going to have to evolve it, right? It's going to be changed. There's going to be new changes that we introduce to how we use our spaces. And I think that what's really important is that we think about, as we make those changes, we are really doing what we can to not just safeguard and safeguard the facilities to make people feel protected and secure, but we are being proactive about it. Because if there's anything that we learned today, it's that the fact that a lot of people or a lot of in our industry have not always taken the proactive approach to security, right? Security's kind of always been a day two scenario. And the reason why we still have a lot of really old technology in our buildings is because access control wasn't always the first place we were going to go when it came to an upgrade, right? I think it's important now that we realize as we move into the future, as maybe more things might happen in our society, which I hope they don't, but the reality is we need to be ready. We need to be ready to be nimble. We need to be dynamic. We need to have the technology in place to allow us to fill gaps quicker. So edge computing is something that where we take smarts from a server, like how we traditionally do access control, and we take those smarts and we put them at the edge. How do we leverage more smart devices in our spaces? Smart devices like an iPhone, for example, to scale to the building instead of requiring the building to scale to the solution, right? So I know some of what I'm saying is very high level, but the point here is that we really need to think every building's different, and how do we leverage technology to not just secure our facilities, but allow us to be proactive, meaning how can we use the iPhones of this world to make our buildings smarter? If we can do it in our home, why can't we do it in our building? The examples I gave you earlier on the slide of where AI is all around us, and you have your Apple Watch, you have your iPhone, you have your smartphone, you have your smart mirror that goes on the wall now that you can work out with, right? You can interact with your mirror, right? All of that technology embodies edge computing. And what that means is we're taking the smarts from a head end, aka we're bringing the brain from the top of the hierarchy to the bottom of the hierarchy. We're bringing a brain and we're putting it into the device, and we're allowing our devices now to make decisions at the edge. And we're bringing AI into that device now, allowing us to scale to a door rather than to a solution. Meaning it's not a one size fits all anymore. In 2021, we have technology that we can leverage that is right in front of us and has been in front of us for many, many years. It's just time now that we think about it in the large scale facility, and we actually bring what we can do at home into the buildings. And it's not that we have to necessarily install more wires, or it's not that we necessarily have to change everything that we have in our facilities. There are ways now today where there are solutions that you can leverage artificial intelligence to run off the existing data that you've invested in within your facility. And when I say existing data, I mean components, pieces of equipment that you've already installed. We can use those pieces of equipment to grab data off of it and feed it to the brain in the box to then do something with it. So when you think about the building and designing to the building, every door is different. There's different things behind every door. When someone walks into a lobby, maybe of turnstiles, and then they go to the elevator, they go upstairs, they're on their main floor, and they want to go into their building, into their space. How do we make that actual workflow from point A to point B, one, a better experience, and then how do we secure and protect what's behind those doors more efficiently for the ones operating and running the buildings? And how do we put more technology into our spaces where we know we can rely on it to do what it's supposed to do instead of us having to be the auditors all the time as the security guards or the ones who are manning our facilities? How do we use AI, and how do we use the technology that exists today to design to the building and the doors and what's behind them and the people in the spaces, rather than building our buildings or designing our buildings around what technology we think exists today, right? So these are 6 areas that when we talk about autonomy and AI, I believe as a thought leader, and I believe is important as for you guys listening on to this quick session here. I think these are 6 areas that we really want to think about. We want to think about, when it comes to access control, what are the things that we can do to give ourselves more time back? Now, I'm going to start with enrollment. Enrollment is the one today I'm going to break down for everybody. I'm going to use that as my use case because these are obviously 6 things that I can dive into. And it's not necessarily that there's just one solution that does all of this. I mean, there are solutions today that can do all of this. And then there's solutions today too that can do a component of it, but it's a smart device, right? It's a smart device that we can use to accomplish this. And maybe instead of having our security guard check for masks every day right now with COVID, maybe we really are going to go use technology to do that for us. And we give that security guard who's getting a full-time salary, we give him more time back in his day to do more and think less, right? So how do we use the components that maybe we also have today, right? And leverage those and put AI into it, or use AI to eliminate the monotony around it, right? So some of the stuff here you see, analytics and platform, that concept I'm going to end with later on in the presentation. But over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to speak to enrollment, and I'm going to break that down, and then we're going to talk about access control, IoT within security, and access control as a platform. So I've already touched on this, but diving into enrollment now, when it comes to monotony around enrollment. So let's just think about what we traditionally have had to do, right? When you have a user who wants to come into our building and they have to get a new badge given to them, right? We have a new employee. There are typically 10 steps, 10 to 7 steps today. The two areas on the left-hand side of the screen describes how we traditionally do enrollment. So traditional enrollment, where it's like 70s to 80s, 90s, and older systems that we haven't upgraded yet or integrated into other systems, are usually around 10 steps. Meaning you have to create a profile. It entails so many different intricacies around just literally getting one badge assigned to someone. You have to create a profile, you have to assign a name to it, you have to, assuming that the person who's doing it knows how to use the system properly, and assuming your whole team, maybe only one person in the building knows how to create badges, right? There's just so many intricacies to how we do traditional enrollment, all the way from programming at the head end, creating the profile, to then issuing a badge, right? So when you then add in biometrics, that's a whole nother ballgame, right? So we're talking just simple badge associations, where you're giving badges out to people. When you integrate enrollment, there's systems today where we can make it a little easier. We can have people maybe enroll at the door. We can give them a badge, and the system can be or if it's a biometric, for example, they can go up to the thumbprint reader, put their thumbprint on it, and then we know we associate that read with a profile that's already been created. And maybe there's like just 7 steps involved instead of 10. But why can't we make it even more efficient, right? If we can use AI to eliminate some of those tasks that we have to typically do. So for example, giving someone a badge in and of itself. Maybe we are using a face instead of a badge. Maybe we're using the face as the template. So we don't have to even worry about the materials involved to give a badge out. Maybe we aren't ready for that. Maybe we feel like badges are what we need for identity. So maybe we still give people badges, but all we do is we print a picture and we print a name on it. So now the employee knows that badge is for identity. But why can't we use a face as the biometric template? Why can't it be that easy, the way you open your phone to open a door? And what does that mean, right? How do we use AI to do that? What does that mean for the one issuing it? What does that mean for the one accessing the space? For the one issuing it, you can leverage technology. There's all different technologies out there that you can actually have somebody enroll at the door. And the fact that they can go up to the door and enroll right there by utilizing smart edge technology, where the processing and the computer power is happening right there at the door, that now has saved time for the one who's issuing the badge and the one who's going into the space. So one, you've just now created a time savings around the user who's actually creating the badge and the user who's going in. And if we as humans can have 30 minutes back in our days, and to take it as far as per user, imagine what we can do with our time. And imagine how much more efficiently we can fill the gaps between the technology of yesterday and the future, right? And the demands today with COVID-19 and all the different things that we have to do to make our buildings more secure and safe. How do we leverage AI to eliminate the monotony around enrollment as one of the many examples? So if you can imagine the way that you enroll into your phone today, if you have an iPhone 10 or you're using a smartphone and you're using a thumbprint, the way that process of how Apple did it, making it so easy for us users, us human operators who own our own phones, to enroll ourselves into our devices. Let's think about that for our buildings. I know it might seem scary, but what I can tell you is that it is getting done today. And the technology behind it isn't new. The technology behind it actually has existed for many, many years, although it just hasn't existed in our commercial spaces. So this is just an example of, I'm purposely have logos off because there's many technologies today that do this. We have Proxy, obviously Alcatraz, my company. We have OpenPath as an example. Many people are familiar with OpenPath is coming out with some technologies today that allows us to do these kinds of concepts, right? So there's so many technologies out there today that we can leverage to do what I just described to you. And it's important that as part of this presentation, when you walk away with some maybe new ideas, that you do the research, that we look into what's out there. We think about our smart devices and how we can bring them together, because maybe you don't use a solution to do all of it, but maybe you can find different solutions that you can put together and create the security IoT for physical security, the IoT, the leveraging of smart devices to create a platform and then to have more time back in your day. And so auto enrollment, to button it up here, is, I think, the future, right? If you think about the future of enrollment, the future of access control being autonomous access control, well, what does that mean? That means auto enrollment. And if we're ready as an entity to take that step into the future, it's something that could be done today. And it's something I highly recommend for those who are on this call and who are listening in today, think about. I'm going to just move into now the final notes here, because I know there's questions. I'm sure that, and as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to answer those questions as they come in, but after the presentation. And so I think one of the key things to walk away with and think about for the future of access controls, how do we leverage access control as an IoT platform, right? Let's really take off the hats of traditional access control for a second and how we're used to doing it with our buildings, and let's get creative for a second. Let's think about how on your iPhone, you can have your phone be the platform of your personal creativity. You can download any app that you want that you can then leverage and utilize to make your day easier. I have my Evernote. Obviously we have our email. We have all the standard stuff, the phone, right? Of course, we have the texting, we have the email, we have the internet, we have our camera. Well, Apple was smart. They leveraged edge technology and they took all the smarts, they put it into the device, and then they created a platform for people to utilize as the operator, to then be more creative. And then they said, hey, all of you product providers out there, you're going to write a program to our platform. And if you think about security in that manner, how do we bring all of our different components in a system and create it and leverage it as an IoT platform now, right? And maybe we choose access control to be that platform. It may sound like a very heavy lift, but if you can start with access control, you actually can get further along. Because cameras today, video management, not that it's a bad technology, but you're not necessarily doing anything with it. The video cameras themselves are not what's opening your doors. What's opening your doors is your access control. So how do we, the same way we take a photo on our phone, open a door with our access control, how do we make that platform of access control more like the phone? And the camera is a component of the phone, the same way we can make the camera and the video a component of our access control system. So we have 2 minutes left. I did my best to really condense this and allow those who are participating today to think out of the box. I purposely wanted this to be high level because I wanted to allow you to be more creative walking away from this and think about, as we go back into our buildings and where we go, how do we leverage edge computing? How do we use AI and make the user experience more seamless? How do we design to the doors within and the experience of the users who are going to be in our spaces and make them feel more comfortable? And I'm going to just jump into a technology landscape here to help you understand that it could be done today. And this just shows you, I mean, of course, my company's up there, but you have AnyVision, you have Suprema, Idemia, there's so many different products out there, Proxy, Keysi, you have OpenPath, you have all these different technologies today around access control. And the market potential is huge. So over the next 3 to 5 years, even 1 to 3 years, you are going to see so many edge technology come out, and you're going to see so many new different levels of smart devices that you can leverage to then create the autonomy within those systems. And I highly recommend that you do what you can to leverage that, because this is just as an ending note showing you, some of the different names out there that we see today, that are ultimately going to evolve. Some today may be difficult to implement, but they're evolving. I mean, Suprema is coming out with some amazing technology that we're seeing, and OpenPath isn't on this list, but they've created, some amazing ways that we can access our buildings with just our phones, right? We have Bluetooth technology, and I think AI, the whole point here to show you, according to SIA, right, the Security Industry and Association, is that artificial intelligence is going to be the number one thing in 2021 from a mega trend. And I believe autonomous access control is going to be the leader of that. So to button it up and to end today, I just want to thank everybody for spending the time with me. If you have any specific questions, please reach out to me. I know I was very high level. I did that on purpose. I wanted us to be creative as we go through these 30 minutes in this presentation. And I really hope that my discussion today around autonomous access control, enrollment, how we can use AI in the simplest terms to make more time in our days, give time back to our people, and make our facilities safer. I really hope that was beneficial for you to unleash the creativity and think about what we can do as we move into the future. So thank you so much again for having me, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.